As the first full week of December settles in, everything feels heavier. The schedule tightens, rotations shrink, injuries stack, and every fantasy manager in your league starts sweating the same question. Why does this month always hit harder than the rest? Welcome back to Round Ball Rants. I'm Vincent Cooper, and this is your Fantasy Tuesday, the one day of the week where we slow the pace down just enough to breathe, to gather ourselves, and to make sense of the chaos that fantasy basketball throws at all of us. Today we're breaking down the Week 7 matchups, the movers, the fallers, the overachievers, the heartbreakers, and the small victories that keep us going, because December is a grind, and sometimes that grind feels personal. But before we get into all that, I want to take a moment and shout out the people who help keep this show moving. Our friends at W Energy. You know this by now, I don't do jitter drinks. I don't do the crash. I don't do the chemical cocktail that leaves you feeling worse 3 hours later. W is clean, it's focused, it's steady. And this month, they just rolled out their brand new website redesign. It looks incredible. Easier navigation, cleaner bundles, and they're teasing the new Tiger's Blood can that's been restocked. And believe me, when that hits, I'm grabbing one for the studio. If you've been waiting for a good moment to try W for the first time, or if you're already a regular and you want to stock up for the holidays, December is the time to do it. And if you're at a crossroads about it, well, you already know how we feel about the crossroads on this show. Use promo code RoundBallRants at checkout. Save some money, support the show, and get something that actually helps you push through the long nights, the editing sessions, the lineup debates, the should I start 'em, should I sit 'em, panic, you know the deal. W.GG, code RoundBallRants. Week 7 didn't feel like fantasy basketball. It felt like a warning shot from December. The cold stretch is here, rotations are tightening, and the Round Ball Rants Fantasy League is starting to separate into contenders, climbers, and teams who are getting swallowed by the schedule. But at the top of the mountain this week, standing alone, was one team. Team of the week, Buckets, Boards, and Dick, 320. This wasn't just a win, this was a statement. Buckets, Boards, and Dick didn't edge out week 7. They crushed it. 320 points, highest in the league. 87.2% lineup efficiency, 6 top picks, 0 worst picks, and the engine behind that explosion, outpouring Shan Gun, 59 points, the highest individual performance of the entire week. This wasn't luck. This was drafting well, sticking with your core, building a roster with real identity, and then watching it ignite in December. The tough week goes to Team Lamb 978 with 59 points. Every league has one team December decides to torture. This week, it was Team Lamb 978. Cold shooting, bad schedules, injuries. Lowest score in the league, lowest efficiency. Nothing clicked. This wasn't mismanagement. It was the fantasy gods being cruel. Top individual performances of Week 7 in the Round Ball Rants Fantasy League are as follows. Alperine Shan Gun with 59. Shai Gilgeous Alexander with 56. Zach Levine with 53. Jaylen Brown with 50. And Pascal Siakam with 50. Shan Gun is the headline, but the rest of the list shows that the arms race is happening at the top. And here are some of the weekly awards handed out by Sleeper. The most efficient team goes to Buckets, Boards, and Dick, 87.2%. That's how you win in December. The least efficient team was Team Lamb 978, 31.1%. A brutal week where nothing landed. The highest score in a loss was Team B Clem, 23, 225. Lost to UJ's, 239. The heartbreak matchup of the week, played great but still lost. Lowest score in a win, Twins, 180. A win wrapped in bubble wrap, but a win is still a win. And here are this week's matchup breakdowns. Buckets, Boards, and Dick 320 versus Team Loose Moose 7763 166. This wasn't a contest, it was a showcase. Everything clicked for BBD. Shangun's explosion, top pick consistency, and elite efficiency made the cleanest win of the week. Twins 180 versus Team Lamb 978 59. Twins coasted here. Lamb 978 never found their footing, and Twins walks out with the easiest dub of Week 7. Team J has the picks 180 versus Team 3 104. J has the picks wins a clean one. Team 3 has now dropped 5 straight. December is eating them alive. And then Team Pebrun 254 versus Curry 30 money 213. The heavyweight fight of the week. Pebrun survives and stays undefeated at 7-0. Curry 30 money played well enough to beat just about anyone else, but Pebrun was the one team that they ran into this week. Team 7 183 versus Team 9 123. Team 7 quietly stacks a second straight win. Momentum matters in December, and they're starting to build it. And then Team UJ's 239 versus Team B Clem 23 225. The heartbreak matchup. B Clem 23 put up 4 top picks and still lost. This is the kind of week that makes fantasy managers question reality. The pick efficiency rankings for Week 7. In first place was Buckets, Boards, and Dick with 87.2%. Team Pebrun came in second with 75.4%. Team B Clem 23 80.9%. Team UJ's 66.4%. Curry 30 money with 67%, and in 6th, Team 7 with 64.9%. Efficiency isn't glamorous, but in December, efficiency wins weeks. And here are the RBR Fantasy League standings after Week 7. Team Pebrun is in first place at 7-0. In second, Buckets, Boards, and Dick at 6-1. In third is Twins at 5-2. In fourth is Team UJ's at 4-3. In fifth is Team Curry 30 money at 4-3. In sixth is Team B Clem 23 at 4-3. In seventh is Team 7 at 3-4. In eighth is Team J has the picks at 3-4. In ninth is Team 3 at 2-5. In 10th is Team 9 at 1-6. In 11th is Team Loose Moose 7763 at 1-6. And in 12th is Team Lamb 978 at 1-6. The top tier is separating, the middle is tightening, and the bottom is fighting December for survival. And that is your true Week 7 check-in for the Round Ball Rants Fantasy Basketball League. The wins, the heartbreaks, the efficiency battles, and the pure dominance at the top. If you thrive this week, you earned it. If you struggled, you're not alone. December doesn't care. But the season does, and it's still wide open. Fantasy football gets all the headlines. Fantasy baseball gets the long-term grind. But fantasy basketball? This is the hardest fantasy sport to play. And anyone in the Round Ball Rants Fantasy Basketball League already knows why. Let's break it down. The schedule never stops. NBA players don't play once a week. They don't have predictable rest cycles like football. They play every other night, sometimes back-to-back. Sometimes 4 games in 5 days, sometimes 2 in 11. Your roster is moving constantly. Your decisions are daily, not weekly. And one bad stretch can sink your week before it even starts. This alone puts fantasy basketball in a different category than all the rest. Rotations change without warning. The NBA is the only fantasy sport where a player can be a starter on Monday, a bench guy by Thursday, and a DNP, or did not play, by Saturday. Coaches experiment, matchups matter, teams protect the younger guys, and veterans get rest. And your fantasy team has to absorb all of that chaos every single night. Injuries also hit harder. In football, one injury affects one game, sometimes multiple games depending on the injury. In baseball, injuries usually come with that long IL stints. But in basketball, a rolled ankle can wipe out 3 games of production. A day-to-day label can destroy an entire matchup. Load management can cost you categories that you were supposed to win. It's not just the injuries, it's the inconsistency of how they're handled. Streaming isn't optional, it's required. Fantasy basketball rewards the managers who stay active. If you're not checking the schedules, tracking the back-to-backs, swapping in streamers, grabbing upside plays, looking ahead to weak side matchups, you will lose to someone who is. There's no set it and forget it in fantasy basketball. There's only set it and obsess over it. And December can be the breaking point. This is the month where rotations shrink. Injuries spike, usage changes. Coaches get experimental. Stars take random rest nights. Fringe players suddenly matter, and lineups require surgical attention. December is where fantasy managers get exposed or they get elevated. And in week 7, it showed us exactly why. The mental toll is real. Fantasy basketball asks more from you than any other fantasy format. Time, attention, patience, emotional energy, daily decision making. And if you care about your team, and I mean really care, fantasy basketball can feel like a second job, especially when you're balancing work, family, December stress, and the league's weekly pressure. This isn't light work. This is basketball every single day. So yeah, fantasy basketball is the hardest fantasy sport. Not because the game is complicated, but because the grind is relentless. And next week we're going to talk about something every fantasy manager faces sooner or later. How to actually survive the December slump and keep your roster from falling apart. That will be on next week's Fantasy Tuesday. Fantasy basketball taught us something today. You can prepare, plan, strategize, make the right call, and still end up on the wrong side of the matchup. And when you step back from box scores and standings, it's hard not to see the parallel. Because December, in its own way, does the same thing to all of us. There's something about this month that adds weight to everything. It's not negative weight, just real weight. The kind you feel in your chest before you feel it in your schedule. In December, every responsibility gets a little louder. The things we normally juggle without thinking, work, family, bills, expectations, routines, they suddenly ask a little more of us. Not because we're failing, but because that's what the season demands. December compresses time. It makes the days feel shorter, the lists feel longer, and the space that we have for ourselves feel much smaller. And the whole month turns into this balancing act where you're trying to show up for everyone, stay present, stay grateful, stay steady, even while you're quietly carrying a lot. And most people don't talk about that part. We talk about the lights, the music, the games, the gatherings, but not the weight underneath all of it. The pressure to be on. The pressure to make things feel special. The pressure to stretch your patience, your wallet, your energy, sometimes further than it wants to go. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's just a real thing. Because December is a month built on meaning. And anything with meaning comes with responsibility. Whether you're a parent trying to give your kids a good memory, or someone working overtime to make ends meet. or someone just trying to stay emotionally centered when the year feels like it's closing in way too fast. It all carries weight. And that's the part nobody really prepares you for. That you can be doing all the right things. You can be giving everything you have. You can be showing up in every way that matters and still feel like you're barely keeping pace with the month. Not because you're falling behind, but because December moves in a different rhythm. It asks more of you, more intention, more patience, more presence, more heart. And maybe that's why the fantasy metaphor, it hits so hard, because it mirrors the same truth. You can put in the effort and the outcome still might not reflect it. You can do the right thing and still feel the weight of uncertainty. You can show up every day and still question if it's enough. And that doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. What I wanted to do with this segment wasn't to solve anything. It's not to offer clarity or comfort. That's what the bounce is for. This is the pause. This is the breath between the work and the meaning. This is the part where we acknowledge what the month feels like. Not to fix it, but to honor it. Because you're not alone in carrying that weight. Most people just won't tell you out loud. And that's what makes December feel heavy at times. Not the obligations, but the silence that surrounds them. So before we move on, before we close tonight's show, I want to name this moment for what it is. You're carrying a lot. Probably more than you let yourself admit. And the fact that you're still showing up, still trying, still investing, still caring, still listening to me talk, that says something about you. Fantasy has its standings. Life doesn't. But the weight that you carry, it means something. Whether the scoreboard reflects it or not. Alright, let's land this the right way. I want to talk about one last thing. Something that sits right between the weight that we carry and the way that we lift ourselves out of it. Because December doesn't just bring pressure, it brings turning points. And at some point this month, quietly, without an announcement, you reach a moment where you have to decide what kind of December you're going to have. Not the kind that happens to you, the kind that you choose. And I don't mean some big dramatic overhaul. I'm not talking about flipping your life upside down or pretending that everything's light and easy. Because we all know that it isn't. I'm talking about a small shift, a subtle one you can feel in your chest before you ever see the results. The moment you stop measuring yourself by what didn't get done and start recognizing what you did manage to carry. The moment you stop apologizing to yourself for being tired and start appreciating yourself for still showing up. The moment that you stop thinking that you're behind and start realizing that you're moving through the hardest month of the year with a heart that hasn't quit on you. December isn't a test. It's a mirror. It shows you how much you care, how deeply you're invested in the people that are around you, how much you've taken on because you want things to be right and warm and steady for the people who count on you. But December also gives you the chance, maybe the only chance, to shift the story you tell yourself. No, I'm not overwhelmed, but I'm carrying a lot because I'm building something that matters. No, I'm not behind, but I'm moving through a heavy season at a pace that protects me. You shouldn't be sitting with, I should be doing more. You should be thinking, I'm doing what I can, and that deserves the credit. And that subtle shift, that new inner story, that's what carries you into the new year with strength instead of exhaustion. Because the truth is, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with any of us. There's nothing broken. There's nothing missing. You're just living a very human December. And you're doing it with more grace than you give yourself credit for. So before we end tonight's episode, before we land the plane, before we breathe out what this month has put on our shoulders already in this first week, let's take one moment to choose the shift. Not perfection, not control, just clarity. Because the weight is real, but so is the strength that's carrying it. My name is Vincent Cooper. This is Round Ball Rants. And I thank you for joining me today. I'll see you tomorrow. And remember, it's not just basketball. It's therapy with a bounce.